If you have your Bible open to Mark chapter 13, we worked our way through verses 1 basically all the way through verse 21. We're going to try to look at 24 through the rest of the chapter today, through 37. This is a famous discourse called the Olivet Discourse, all right? Now, what you're going to notice in Mark's recording of the Olivet Discourse is each one of the discourses, and in fact, by the way, listen, this is true with the Gospels. You know, the Gospels tell the same story of Jesus all from different angles. Sometimes we can glean more information by kind of putting them all together, right? And cross-referencing off of I heard one preacher recently say, make a super gospel off of it. But we have to keep in mind, God did not give us them all together. He could have done that. He actually gave us 4 different accounts. That means that even though Mark's account of the Olivet Discourse, Matthew has an account also, but they teach different things. Did you know that? They teach different things. In fact, the parables emphasize different things in different accounts of the gospel. So if you're reading through and you're used to always cross-referencing, I want to encourage you, stay in a book. You'll learn a lot more every once in a while, too, about that passage. So I said all that to say we're primarily going to be staying in the book of Mark today as we finish off this Olivet Discourse, this talk of the second coming. And I'll tell you what, the second coming of Jesus Christ is not a conspiracy theory. It is fact. Jesus Christ will come again. Now, it's important to understand the second coming of Christ is not the same thing as the rapture. The rapture of the church is you really see in 1 Thessalonians. And in fact, that was the first book of the Bible that I preached through when I was here, and it's on our YouTube channel. So if you want to know more about kind of broader end time events, maybe what the rapture is, go back and look at those. And there's also other guys you can look up and you can encourage you. But the second coming of Christ is not the rapture. So I'm not talking, Mark 13 is not talking about the rapture of the church. This is talking about the second coming of Jesus Christ. And it starts off by the disciples asking, what's going to be the sign of these things? How are we going to know when these things will happen? And of course, they failed to ask why. What happened here is when Jesus told of the temple being destroyed to the Jewish person, that was their life. They could not imagine a life where the temple in Jerusalem was not up and functioning. So they must have thought, if the temple's going to be destroyed, well, that's also the end of the world. The interesting, they probably assumed that when the temple was going to be destroyed, that was going to be the end of the world. And that's why Jesus said, the end is not yet in verse 7. The end is not yet. In fact, the temple was destroyed in 70 AD by the Roman Emperor Titus. And there was even a pig that has been sacrificed in the temple. So when we come to this teaching on the end times, there's a lot of different teaching that could be taught. There's a lot of personal takes. There's a lot of what could be called a hot take. And I hope every one of you knows, here at Central Baptist Church, what goes on in the teaching and preaching, not only in this pulpit, but in our classes and everywhere, should not be and is not hot takes. We teach and preach what we know for a fact, what we can say, thus saith the Lord. And so when we look at Mark chapter 13, we are going to stick to exactly what we know to be true about the second coming. Because the truths that are in here are plainly revealed is what God once emphasized, right? Now, there have been many, many people try to predict when the second coming of Christ will happen, and we've talked about last week that breeds fear, anxiety, but let's be honest, it's kind of fun to talk about though, isn't it? It is. I remember when Y2K happened. I was in high school. I mean, when Y2K happened, the turn of the millennium, how many of you remember where you were that evening on New Year's Eve? Would you raise your hand? I do. I mean, that was impactful when Y2K happened. All the software for all of the banks everywhere was only configured in 2 digits for the year, so everything was going to collapse, and it was going to be basically the end of the world because the world couldn't function, and it was just all going to fall apart, right? It's not what happened. But I got to be honest, it was scary. It was scary. There's other things too, like the Mayan calendar. How many of you have ever heard of the date when the Mayan calendar was going to end on Sunday, December 21st, 2012? Did it happen? No, it did not happen. There has been predictions and predictions all throughout human history. In fact, a man by the name of Nostradamus was a French astrologer and a wise man who believed that, and a lot of his society believed that he was endowed with wisdom for prophetic predictions. He lived from 1503 to 1566, and during his life, he actually predicted several things that became true. He also had a popular prediction concerning the end of the world. He predicted that the, quote, King of Terror would fall from the sky in 1999. And this prediction was popularized by some groups because they connected it with a solar eclipse, a total solar eclipse that took place on August 11th, 1999. Did that happen? Did the eclipse happen? Yes, on August 11th, 1999. Was the King of Terror fallen from the sky then and come to rule the earth? No. So what's all this fuss about? The truth of the end times is all about the 100% promise of God that Jesus Christ will come again to this earth in a glorious second coming. And believers should have hope because of that. For believers, the second coming of Christ is a message of hope, is a message of peace. So, all that was basically review. Let's look at verse 24 now. In the middle of this teaching, Jesus says, "But in those days, after that tribulation, the sun will be darkened, and the moon will not shed its light, and the stars will be falling from the sky, and the powers in the heavens will be shaken, and they will see the Son of Man coming in clouds with great power and glory." Now, I'm going to read that sentence again, because that doesn't say might. It doesn't say, this is a for sure thing. Then they will see the Son of Man coming in the clouds with power and great glory. I don't know about you, that gives me some hope right there. That's a sure thing. Jesus Christ will come again. And he'll send out the angels and gather his elect from the four winds, from the ends of the earth to the ends of heaven. What a glorious picture of the second coming of Christ. So to believe the second coming of Christ is not a conspiracy theory. It's a Bible prophecy, and it's a promise by God. It gives hope to the believer. It gives peace to the believer, and it is going to be awesome. But when is it going to be? Let's continue reading. Verse 28. "Learn this lesson from the fig tree. As soon as its branch becomes tender and sprouts leaves, you know that summer is near. In the same way, when you see these things happening, recognize that he is near at the door." Now, you're ready for the $1 million question? What are these things? Look in that verse. When you see these things happening. Jesus has talked a lot about different events that have taken place and will take place since he began speaking in verse 5. Are these things the wars and earthquakes in verses 7 to 8? Is it the abomination of desolation talked about in verse 14, which surely could happen again, but it's definitely already happened once? Is it the destruction in Jerusalem? What are these things? Spoiler alert, Mark doesn't tell us. I don't think he knows. I don't think Mark knew. But he knows that when these events happen, he's near, at the door. And then, now, to make it even more complicated, look at verse 30. Truly, I tell you, this is Jesus teaching his disciples. He says this generation will certainly not pass away until all these things take place. Oh, how do we reconcile that? I mean, that is a serious question. It does not matter what eschatological view on the end times you hold to. There are tough questions that need to be answered for every point of view. Did you know that? There's tough questions. What does it mean that this generation will not pass away until these things take place? Heaven and earth will pass away, but my word shall never pass away. In other words, Jesus is saying, it's going to happen. This is a sure promise. And this generation is not going to pass away. Well, what are these things? Who is this generation? What is this generation? There's 4 common takes on that. I'm going to give you all 4. I'm not going to tell you what my opinion is, because I do not believe that my opinion belongs in this pulpit. You want my opinion? Ask me afterwards. The first take on this, what is this generation? What does he mean by this generation will not pass away until all these things take place? The contemporary generation of Jesus' day, who would see the temple be destroyed in AD 70, that's what a lot of people believe. That this generation will not pass away until all these things take place. In other words, he could be saying, all this stuff is going to happen soon. Remember the abomination of desolation? Remember the 70 AD when the temple's going to be destroyed, everything? Well, that a generation was about 40 years. It was considered around 40 years. Jesus died in about 33 AD. Well, 70 minus 30, that's within the 40 years. Could that be a possibility? It could be a possibility. And many good believers who love the Lord throughout church history, and many good believers who love the Lord today believe that. The second take is this. The eschatological generation, the last days generation that will be alive at the end of history will all see these things come to pass because they happen close to each other. That could be a very good take also. What does it mean by this generation will certainly not pass away until all these things take place? Was Jesus talking about, Peter, John, this generation, you guys? Or was he like, when all this stuff happens in the future, this generation, meaning that generation in the future, it's all going to happen close together? That's also a pretty solid interpretation of it right there. Also a pretty solid. Very possible. The word generation could also be, number 3, could be understood to be, well, this generation, he's talking about the Jewish people, the race of the Jewish people. End time events is all around Jerusalem and the Jewish people, So this generation could be understood as the race of the Jewish people. A lot of people think that too. A lot of other people think, number 4, that the generation of Jesus' day would see the coming of the kingdom. Now, there's actually a bunch of other takes on that. Those are the 4 most popular, though. Okay? The bottom line is, the next verse says, now concerning the day nor the hour, no one knows. Verse 32. Neither the angels in heaven nor the Son, but only the Father. And do you know what that means? That means the litmus test for separation and acceptance of other believers is not your view on the end times. The litmus test for separation and acceptance of other believers is the gospel of Jesus Christ. That's what it is. In other words, did you know there is actually some room where we can be generous and to other believers who may differ in some areas, as long as they don't differ in the person and work of Jesus Christ? Amen? You need to know that Jesus is everything, but your interpretation on the exact timeline of events, good people are in many different areas here. So that this is, if you wonder why, well, why is it even Jesus' teaching here kind of clouded? Well, he even says, concerning the day, no one knows, neither the angels in heaven nor the Son, but only the Father. Now, at the end of this passage is a transition from verse 33 to the rest of 37, where Jesus closes out the topic. But before we get to that passage, it's important to understand that in particularly those phrases in verses 29 and 30, these things, when you see these things happening, recognize the end is near. And then that what is these things? And then the other question that I asked was, this generation, who is this generation? Those are blurry puzzle pieces. And this is a blurry puzzle piece, there's no doubt about it. And it could fit in a number of different areas, which is why there's different takes on it, okay? But it's important for us to understand the end times is not about filling in the pieces of the puzzle. It's not. The end times is not about making a chart and seeing it all there. God did not give us a chart. He gave us words, okay? That's not what the end times is about. The end times is about trusting God. And we must remember that we're not the masters of the puzzle. God is. Only God knows the picture that the puzzle makes. And only He knows where the pieces go, right? Now, some of you may think and thirst for more on this. And I can promise you, eventually we're going to preach through Daniel. Eventually we're going to preach through Revelation. And we're going to get to it and more. But this is all Mark gives us, so this is all we're going to get to today. The puzzle of time belongs to God, and God is the only one that knows exactly 100% how they all go together. And that hence Jesus' confession in 32. Concerning the day nor the hour, which is exactly what the disciples asked. When are these things going to happen? What's the sign? If you want to know the day or the hour, I can't tell you because I don't know, he says. So essentially, it's fascinating because all throughout Jesus' ministry, he was asked all these questions, and his answer always astounded people. He spoke as one who had authority. He spoke the truth like nobody. But this is the only question he was asked where he actually said, I don't have that answer. Fascinating. Very fascinating. No one knows. Jesus will come again, but only God knows when. If I can summarize Jesus' answer from verse 5 all the way through verse 32, you can summarize it like this. Jesus will come again. Sure thing. But only God knows when. Now the question is, what does that mean for us as believers? If you're here and you've accepted Jesus Christ, how should we react to this teaching of the return of Jesus Christ? What does this mean for us? What's the takeaway, if you will, here? How should a believer respond to the end times? Well, the first several verses of Jesus' reaction, he says you should not react with panic. You should not react with fear. You should not react with anxiety. Jesus' teaching in Mark 13 begins with the command to not be alarmed. Don't be alarmed, right? But what's required of us? What is God saying? Here's what I expect you to do because you know I'm coming back. That's in this next passage. And can I tell you this? The emphasis in all of Mark 13, Jesus says a lot here, and I want to encourage you, read this whole chapter over and over and over, and you will see that the emphasis is in verse 33 all the way through 37 at the very end. Jesus is not majoring on a lot of events here. He's saying, here's what it means to you. This is important. This is big. Here's how I know this is the emphasis also. Because there's an onslaught and rush of imperative verbs. And what's an imperative verb? If you've been here, you know what I'm talking about. But I'll explain it just in case. A verb is an action word. When you read the Bible, pay attention to the verbs. See where the action is. That will help you in understanding what's going on. Now, an imperative verb is a command. A command. How many of you parents have said to your kids, go clean your room? Right? That go is a verb, and it's a command. Go clean your room. That's an imperative. There's an onslaught. There's 4 of them here. In fact, look at verse 33. Watch. My Bible, as a Christian Standard, it has an exclamation point there. You want to know why it has an exclamation point? Because it's an imperative command. That's the first one. Watch. Next two words, be alert. Another imperative verb. This should catch your attention right here. What does all this teaching on the end times mean? It means watch. It means be alert. Two in a row. For you don't know when the time is coming. And then Jesus gives a wonderful, Jesus is such a good storyteller. He gives this awesome parable, example, whatever you want to call it. Look at verse 34. It's like a man on a journey who left his house and gave authority to his servants, gave each one his work, and commanded the doorkeeper to be alert. Therefore, be alert. That's another imperative. Notice that switch. He commanded the doorkeeper to be alert, and then he's looking at the disciples now. Therefore, be alert. That's the takeaway. That's the lesson Jesus is teaching here. Jesus is telling the disciples, you need to be alert, since you don't know when the master of the house is coming, whether in the evening or at midnight or at the crowing of the rooster or early in the morning. Otherwise, when he comes suddenly, he might find you sleeping. And I say to you, what I say to you, I say to everyone, final imperative verb, be alert. So what's the takeaway here? You know, some passages are so easy to understand what our responsibility before God is for knowing that. And Jesus says, watch, be alert. Verse 33. Then verse 35, be alert. Verse 37, be alert. The question is not what we should do, but what does that mean? What does be alert mean? What does be alert mean? Well, I'm a nerd. I got to put some Greek in here, all right? You know what the meaning of be alert means in Greek? Be alert. That's what it means. Be alert. It means be ready. It means stay awake. Stay awake. That fits in perfectly with what Jesus is saying here, because he's saying, listen, it's like the whole second coming of Jesus Christ. It's like a man on the journey. That man is Jesus, who left his house when he ascended up into heaven after the first coming. He left and he gave authority to his servants and to each one his work, and commanded the doorkeeper, that's us, to be alert. Therefore, be alert, since you don't know when the master of the house is coming. He says, doorkeeper, you need to stay awake. Jesus could come in the middle of the night. He could come. You don't know when he's coming. So you need to be ready no matter when he's coming. Now, the only word or hint I can give you as far as to when, soon. I don't think there's a human being on this planet that can add more to that. Soon. He can come before I'm done preaching this sermon. He could come today. He could come back at any time, depending on your eschatological view, which we need to extend grace to believers. Got to tuck that in there. He could. He could. Jesus could come back. That's why the command is, be alert. Be alert. I say to everyone, he says, be alert. Disciples, this isn't just for you. Verse 37, I say to everyone, be alert. Don't be alert with panic, fear, and anxiety. Be alert means be ready, stay awake. In other words, it's fascinating because when you read verses 34 to verse 37, you are looking into a mirror. You're looking into a mirror. You look in that, you see, be alert. Watch, be alert. I say to everyone, be alert. It's a message for you. Be alert does not mean know every event. Be alert means live for Jesus. That's what it means. Live for Jesus. Be alert. Great. Watch. Watch for signs? No. The be alert is not on the external. You don't want to be alert. Now, there's nothing wrong with watching for signs, by the way. Nothing wrong with having a good feel. But that's not how you prepare for Jesus' coming. You prepare for Jesus' coming not from anything on the outside, but from on the inside. You know how I know that? Look in verse 36. Otherwise, when he comes in suddenly, he might find you sleeping. So what is the preparation for his second coming? The preparation and the homework and the preparation for Jesus Christ's second coming is you preparing yourself. That's what it is. Make sure that you are ready. How do you do that? The preparation for Jesus Christ's return is not about calculating a date of Armageddon or linking world events to the fulfillment of Bible prophecies, although there's nothing wrong with that. With it still doesn't give us a time and date. I'm not bashing any of that. I want everybody to understand that. It means we should live every day as if today is the day Jesus will return. That's what it means. Live every day as if this is the day Jesus Christ will return. He's saying, you're the doorkeeper. Doorkeeper, you don't know what time I'm going to come back. I might come at midnight. I might come in the cock crowing. I might come in the evening. I might come in the morning. So I hope you brought some energy drinks with you because you need to stay awake. You need to be ready. Watch yourself, he's saying. Watch yourself. He could come today. Let me put it this way. In evangelism training, I had one question drilled into me. I mean, this was drilled into me. In fact, this was drilled into me so much, I've asked this question to hundreds and hundreds, probably thousands, to be honest, of people. If you died today, are you 100% sure that heaven would be your home? That was how I was taught to evangelize, to open the conversation about Jesus. If I don't know somebody's a Christian, well, let me ask this. Here's how you got. If you died today, say something terrible happened, do you know if you would be in heaven or not? Are you 100% sure? I mean, that strikes right at the issue, doesn't it? If you know Jesus, you know your sins are forgiven, you know you're in heaven, not because in any righteousness we have done, but because Jesus Christ finished work on the cross and his grace that has saved us. Do you know that? But this question right here, verse 34 through 37, is a different question. This question is not for unbelievers. This question is for believers. Here's the takeaway here. If you've accepted Jesus, if you say, yes, I know I'm going to heaven, here's the question that Jesus is asking you per Mark 13 today then. If Jesus returned today, are you 100% sure he would be satisfied with your life? It's the same question, but for us believers. If Jesus returned today, if today was your last day before you saw Jesus in one way, shape, or form, rapture coming, are you 100% satisfied with the life that you have lived for Jesus? How do you prepare for Jesus' second coming? Ask yourself that question. Are you 100% satisfied with the life you lived for Jesus Christ? That's what it means to watch. That's what it means to be alert. That's what it means. So what has God been putting on your heart that you've not done yet? What is the one thing you feel that God wants you to do? You need to go and do it. You need to go and do it. Because the end times is near. You could be standing in front of Jesus sooner than you realize. Watch. Be alert. Look inside before you turn on the news. Look inside. That's how we prepare. That's how we prepare to stand before our King. So maybe it's a lifestyle change. Maybe it's a commitment to serve Jesus regularly. Maybe it's a commitment to start giving. Maybe you have a friend that does not know Jesus. By the way, the message of Christians to non-believers is not his second coming, it's his first coming. Think about that. The message, the number one message that we need to share to non-believers is not that Jesus is coming again. It's that Jesus came the first time. Do you want to know why? It's because for a non-believer, if all we do is tell them about the second coming of Jesus Christ, all we're doing is telling them about the condemnation. That we're giving them no hope. The second coming of Christ is hope for believers, but for unbelievers, it's condemnation and judgment. So if you know somebody who doesn't know Jesus Christ, you need to go out and tell them about Jesus Christ's first coming, how he was born of a virgin, how that was prophesied in Isaiah 9:6 and 7:14 and Psalm on all of those passages, and Psalm 22, and you need to tell them all about that Jesus Christ is God in the flesh, that he lived a perfect life, that he's sinless, 100% man, 100% God, that he's God who veiled his glory, didn't leave his glory, but veiled his glory in flesh, lived a perfect life, the life that everybody falls short of, the life that you fall short of, that I fall short of, and that they fall short of. And Jesus Christ died on the cross to pay for their sin, and the only way they can have their sins forgiven and be brought into a right relationship with God is through faith in the death, burial, and resurrection of Jesus Christ. That's our message to go and tell. Then we can tell them about the second coming. But if we get those confused, all we're going to do is condemn them. The message of Christians and non-believers is Jesus' first coming. They need to the hope of believing in Jesus' first coming. So the second coming of Christ brings hope for those who believe and judgment for those who don't believe. So be sure you are louder on the gospel than in anything else in your life. Be sure you're louder on the gospel than anything else. So maybe we need to make friends who don't know about Jesus, who don't understand everything in his first coming. If he comes today, would he be finding you doing exactly what he's called you to do and being in your heart exactly who he's called you to be? If he comes today, are you ready? Are you 100% sure he will be satisfied? Would you be able to look him in the eye, not with a sinful pride, but humbly say, the best I could, Lord, mission accomplished. The best I could, Lord, mission accomplished. That's how you prepare. Don't wait a year. Don't wait until the next quarter. Don't wait until the next week. Don't wait until tomorrow. Don't wait till the end of this sermon. Make that decision right now. That's the urgency with these imperatives. Be alert, be ready. You don't know when. It's going to be sooner than you realize. Don't wait. So what has God been putting on your heart that you've not taken the step of faith yet to do? Maybe there's something you need to get rid of. If Jesus came back right now, what would you be ashamed of before him? Be alert. Be ready. If you stood before Jesus Christ right now, what would you be ashamed of? This passage commands us to be ready to see Jesus at any time. That's the purpose. So don't leave here today saying, I will be ready. No. Say, I am ready. I am ready. Let's be honest, when Jesus Christ returns, he's probably not going to touch down by the Harding Memorial in Marion, Ohio. Yep, it's going to be in the Mount of Olives. That means he might make history because that might be the first news story that's true on every station. If Jesus returned today, your adrenaline would surge. Your heart rate would skyrocket. You would be filled with excitement. But I wonder, would there be that fleeting thought for a split second go through your mind? I wish I would